Hello, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining the fourth edition of our Knowledge Exchange Series. My name is Jasmine. I am Eval's Knowledge and Relationship Manager, and today I am joined by Fabrizio, our Senior Associate, and Isabel Schwartzman, Senior Consultant in Education. If you are watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, say your name or where you're from, and also feel free to drop your questions and comments in the chat. We will get back to them at the end of the presentation. And without further ado, let me hand it over to Fabrizio for some opening remarks.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Immense pleasure to have you on board today once again for our knowledge exchange series. As Yasmin said, it's an event that we hold quarterly here at Eval, and the purpose is to showcase some of our research and also discuss some topics that are directly related to the practice of evaluation. So this time around, we have the pleasure of hosting Isabel Schwartzman. She is a sociologist by training. She has a BA in sociology from York University, but she carried out her career almost entirely in the education sector. She has a master's in technology, innovation, and education from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and a master's in development management from Ruhr University in Bochum, Germany. She's been working in educational management and policy since 2004. She has worked for Santillana, the publisher, and also the SM Group, the Lemon Foundation, among others. So she is someone who has deep knowledge and deep insight into how education is managed and how the education ecosystem functions, but also has an outside eye to it as a consultant, as an evaluator. And today she is going to discuss some of the issues that she considers particular about evaluating education. As most of you know, Planeval works within the development cooperation sector. So we're keen to improve our understanding of how to evaluate education, especially in developing country settings. And so plenty of the insights that are going to be discussed today are certainly applicable to the experience of you, to your experience, those of you who are in the audience today. So the way this is going to work is I am going to read the questions that you have in the chat box. So feel free to ask your questions as we go along. You see that the presentation is organized in such a way as to invite discussion. And I am sure that you're going to have a lot of questions that's, in terms of the relationship between evaluation and your own practice. So we very much value your practice either as an education professional or as an evaluator. So in whatever capacity, feel free to write your questions. And then towards the end, we're going to have a discussion, hopefully very lively. Yeah. So we have about an hour ahead of us, and without further ado, I invite Isabel Schwartzman. Welcome.
Hi, thank you very much for the invitation. Yasmin and Fabrizio, I'm very excited to be here and to discuss this important issue of education and the evaluation context. I'll share my presentation and then I'll start. Just wait a minute. So I think now you're all seeing it. So we decided on this name for the presentation, Why Education is Different, Exploring Unique Approaches to Evaluating Educational Policies and Programs. We'll see that some of the issues that I bring are particular to education, and others I'm sure you can see how they relate to other important issues also in development policy, cooperation, and also in evaluation. I'll talk a little bit about my experience with education evaluation to start with, and also to have some touch points in case you want to ask or comment on a specific topic. This is a little bit about me. Fabricio already introduced me. And I have like 20 years, so I started 2004 with 2024, 20 years of experience in different roles and sectors in the education field, especially in Brazil. And I also have a background, an international background. So I do management, educational management, and also research in different languages and in different settings. And I have a deep knowledge of the Brazilian education system. And I'll be referring a lot to the Brazilian experience in my presentation. So those are some of the programs, some of the evaluation programs that I've participated on during my career. First, a national adult literacy program in Brazil. So that's a program for Brazilians, people in Brazil and all over the country who haven't had the opportunity to have education as they were children. And it's a national program. I was part of the Ministry of Education as a consultant, working in the monitoring and evaluation plan. I also was very deeply involved in the national textbook program, but then as a textbook provider, and I was doing research, a lot of research to improve the books that were distributed among other books by the Ministry of Education to schools all over the country as well, to see how teachers were using it, how they were appropriate to the kids, making classrooms observations, interviewing, running focus groups, etc. When I returned from my master's in the US, I worked for a foundation helping to implement a digital math curriculum in public schools in Brazil and train teachers to use this curriculum and to look at the data that was being generated by the platform. And then we organized an impact assessment where we were contracting evaluators. Then as I had a role as in an assessment company, and this is something we're going to talk about when we talk about impact assessment in education. We talk a lot about tests. So we were organizing and elaborating tests and implementing tests as part of an impact assessment of a full-time schooling program. Then again, as a product director, we organized and structured a math and reading intervention in partnerships that's been implemented in partnership with districts, educational districts, schools in all over the country. And we were also doing a lot of research and user experience research to improve the intervention. Also, when we developed the digital assessment platform, where we helped teachers in kindergarten make observations about how their children were developing, and then we would structure that in the platform. And then we did a lot of research to see how useful that was and relevant to the teachers and how they could actually use it. Then with Plan Eval, I participated on an evaluation. It was a developmental evaluation in partnership with UNICEF Uruguay. And they're implemented in Plan Ceibal. That's an innovation organization that they have that work together with the Ministry of Education to create and implement innovative educational programs. And we did a developmental evaluation on that initiative, which was really interesting. And lately helped organize also a plan and contract evaluators for a teacher online professional development program. So you can see that it's very varied. It's mostly in Brazil, and there's a lot of innovation entailed in the different programs that I've been participated in. So we can go back to those issues later if you like. And the way I thought of organizing this presentation is by talking about the OECD DAC criteria, because that's a framework that evaluators that work with international cooperation are familiar with. I'm sure in all types of evaluation that you're doing it to answer the question based on the OECD DAC criteria. So I think that's a way of organizing our conversation and seeing what's relevant, some of the issues that are relevant for education in each of the criteria. We'll go through the 6 criteria quickly. So first, relevance. We need to know if the intervention is doing the right things. So is it even relevant what we're doing? Then second, how coherent it is, how coherent it is within the intervention, but also among other aspects, among other policies, government policies, and all other initiatives that are taking place in the same context, in the same place. Third, effectiveness, and there we say that a lot of the issues come into effectiveness. It's where we want to see if the intervention is actually achieving its objectives. Efficiency, how well are the resources being used? And then impact, what difference does it actually make? So in the lives of the people who are part of the intervention and also in a broader society. And finally, will the benefit last? So once the program is finished, or once the resources for the specific intervention are not there anymore, will it last and will be sustainable? So those are the 6 big questions that we commonly have to answer. And we're going to talk about specific topics that arise from them within the educational context. So when we talk about relevance and we talk about education, and here I'm mostly focused on basic education. So for children, we're not talking about universities. We talk about beneficiaries and we talk about society. So one thing that we often forget, because we're talking about children, right? And when we're doing evaluation of educational practice, we talk a lot to teachers and to school districts and leadership. But we need to know for the students that are going to be like 10, 12 years in the educational system and in basic education, do they find it relevant? Is it important for them, what they're learning, what they're doing right now, right? Are they finding it interesting? Are they finding it useful? And then we have to think about the children's future. So is this relevant for what they would need for their future? Would it teach the skills that they need? And we could think about a more philosophical, liberal philosophical way in terms of will it make them free to choose whatever they would like, and will make them most happy and fulfilled in their future? So that's more like a broad question about education. But we don't do education just for the specific, for the students who are there, but the idea is that it's important for society as a whole. So does it develop good citizens that will make society a better place for everybody? Is it developing the professionals that we need for the country to develop? And also now we talk a lot about technological disruption and artificial intelligence. And are we actually providing these kids, these teenagers, with the skills they will need for all this disruption that is coming, the future society that is coming? And we can also ask questions about values, and here it can be a polarized issue. It can be like people have different opinions about it, but what type of values should school teach? What type of values should family teach? So that's also the type of questions you could ask concerning relevance. So education is a big issue, and even who is not directly involved has been part of the educational system, or has children, or is part of a larger society that needs to have citizens and workers and professionals that are well educated. And so I think that's the relevance of education is a topic that interests everybody in society. And then we talk about coherence. So we could think of coherence in two terms as well. Coherence among government levels and coherence among policy dimensions. In Brazil is a very large country, and we have 3 levels of government. We have the federal government, the state government, and then what we call municipalities. That could be like the districts, for example, in some places, which is the local government. And so primary education is managed by the local government, and middle school is mainly managed by the state level, for example. But one of the things, and then the federal level has other duties like assessment and common core curriculum and other. So one of the things that is important to see is how coherent are the policies among the different levels. So for example, we have some policies where the state taxes benefit municipalities that adhere to a certain program and improve education. So there is like a policy that that is coherent among levels, or for example, a national common core aligned to curriculum at the state level, and also aligned to the textbooks that are chosen by schools and bought by the National Textbook Program by the federal government. So those are some policies that can be and are coherent, for example, in Brazil, in certain places. And then you can think about coherence among policy dimensions. So you could think that this is obvious, but not always. So different programs from the same sphere, for example, curriculum, the school books, assessment, professional development, school management practices, monetary incentives, they should all be aligned to specific strategies that are considered relevant. For example, improving literacy rates, that would be like a strategic goal. And so this is a way of looking at and evaluating as well the coherence of a policy in education. When we talk about effectiveness, we can talk about very different topics, and I chose three here to talk about. The first is very specific of education, which is methods and resources. So, for example, if a doctor subscribes some medicine, of course, you always subscribe a medicine that has been tested before giving it to a patient. And when we have methods or resources in education, they also should have some research background. For example, the methodology should be aligned to what we know already by cognitive science and neurosciences, that is aligned to how students learn, how the brain works. So those are some of the questions we should ask when we're talking about methodology, for example, pedagogical methods. And also when we talk about educational resources, so digital or print, are they aligned to the needs of the students, to the needs of the teachers? Are students engaged? Do students like to use this resource? Are they find it fun? They find it interesting? Can the teachers use it? Have they been trained? Do they have the necessary training or even technological infrastructure to use whatever we're giving them to use? Does it make their work better? When we talk about scholarship, there's a few questions. What school leadership processes are in place that promote quality education? Do the school leaders have frequent meetings, for example, with teachers to talk about student achievement, to talk about the students' needs and what their difficulties are? How does school leadership deal with the issues of violence and bullying in school? How do they promote a climate where everyone is welcome? Is there community engagement? Can the leadership promote the participation of families in school issues? And so in that way, make it more democratic, but also make the families more involved with the education of their children, which is known as very important. And finally, we have some issues of equity and inclusion that you could think that are broader than education. They're very relevant to education field and also to all other fields. But are the processes inclusive to everyone? Can girls thrive in this context? Do they have opportunities? Do Black children have the same opportunities and can thrive? Children with disabilities, etc. So those are some of the big issues in effectiveness when we talk about education. Efficiency. So I thought about two very large issues in efficiency when we talk about education. Of course, we have others, but we can think of education as a very people-intensive service. So a lot of the money, a lot of the resources is spent on payment and payroll checks. So if a lot of the resources is spent on paying teachers, for example, what is the most efficient way of using these resources? And that's a very large debate. So we say that the teacher should earn more, and so should use the money, for example, to pay a little bit more to every teacher, or should we use other structures that make it more efficient? For example, can we have structured career paths where teachers improve their wages when they go further on their career and assume other responsibilities? For example, leading with more difficult classrooms or schools, or teaching other teachers, or doing research, or even going to leadership roles. Or another way is, should we pay bonuses on performance? But then how do we measure performance? What is teacher performance? Is teacher performance student performance? Or what is it? And so we could also maybe be more efficient in all these ways. And they have also some advantage and disadvantage. And then the other way of looking at efficiency would be scale, for example. So again, it's very people intensive. Can we scale? How much can we scale education? So how large can classrooms be without compromising quality? 15 students, 20, 30, 40 students in the same classroom. How much is too much? And that's an interesting and an important issue to talk about when we talk about efficiency. And also technology. So how can technology be helpful? In what context can we actually advocate for distance education? If we're talking about children, it's hard. But if we're talking about teenagers and there's some specialty course, for example, an advanced math course that you can't have in the school, or advanced English, you can have the teacher there, maybe you can have some distance education of some type. Hybrid model, so we can have the teacher in the classroom, but they can use a platform, a system that automatically grades the assessments, the tests. And so teachers can spend less time doing some work that could be automated, and spend more time with the children, with the students, thinking about how they can improve teaching. This can improve efficiency a lot. And again, the question of artificial intelligence that is very relevant today. So can artificial intelligence start some specific student needs, for example, by helping them with homework, and so making education more efficient? Because the teacher can't respond to every student individually all the time, but maybe the artificial intelligence can help with that. So those are some of the efficiency questions. And then we go to sustainability. So when we have a democracy, and then we have alternate governments, this is very good and very important, but there's also some challenges concerning policy and educational policy. So how can we, despite government changes, sustain an educational program? And one way is through legislation. So in Brazil, for example, we have some legislation concerning funding, concerning minimal teacher payment, that even if government changes, the legislation is the same. And so it sustains the policy. There's a minimum that has to be paid from taxes from the local governments that goes to education, for example. Also, again, a structured career path. So when we professionalize education, the people that work in education, teachers that can become leaders, that can become then municipal local officials implementing the programs. This can help sustain programs and practices and knowledge. And then participation and accountability. So how participatory are the processes ensuring ownership at the school and community level? If we implement a program that teachers, especially teachers, think that it's important and find it valuable, and then it actually improves their work and their conditions. Even if there's a change in policy, a change in government, they will probably continue doing what they learned and what experience they had and they find valuable. And how much is society involved in education and vigilant of its politicians? And this is also proved to be very important, be it families, councils, not-for-profits, foundations, etc. And lastly, we talk about impact. So when we talk about impact in education, it's a lot about student learning. So we can think about impact evaluation, experimental or quasi-experimental evaluations. In many cases, what they do is that they compare the groups that were part of a program with groups, similar groups, control or comparison groups that have not been part in the program, and then they see how assessment results have changed in the group that participated and in the groups that have not participated. In Brazil, we have very consolidated assessment data. Every 2 years, we have a national examination, and we can see results by school level and by district and state, and also different groups. So we can use a lot of this data to when we talk about impact assessment. But we have to ask some questions there as well. So are the official exams actually measuring what the program seeks to deliver? And sometimes we are unfair to the program because we are evaluating the program with the metrics that is important for policy, but it's not necessarily what the program is aiming to do or what it can achieve. And this has happened, and it happens sometimes. So sometimes it's important to have our own exams or different exams when we evaluate, and not only use the official ones. Also, our appropriate statistical methods have been used in the statistical in the assessment. There we have some more technical statistical issues. So in education assessment, the item response theory is a statistical method that is normally used, that you can then compare different groups in time and in territory. And if the exams don't use this type of statistical analysis, then sometimes the tests are not comparable. So that's something you have to be aware of when you're using assessment data. And then there's an issue which goes a lot beyond evaluation, but it's what we call teaching to the test. So often when educational results, test results are used for incentives, for example, to provide more funding for the municipality for the program, or especially to professionals in education, it can distort a bit what is being done in schools. And so teaching to the test is when children get prepared to do that test, and so they will be very good on that evaluation, but maybe they're missing out on other things. So that's an issue that can happen in education, and we have to be aware. And then we have impact beyond student learning, that then we finish the way we started. So the education is broader than learning, and learning what can be measured by tests. So it's not enough, for example, if children are passing the test or are having good results, but they're depressed. So student emotions and well-being is something that is being looked at very much in the last years, and it's a preoccupation, a challenge. Today, another issue is nutrition, for example. We have a very large school food program in Brazil, which is one of the important reasons why many children even go to school, because they have their daily meal there. And if you have a good nutritious meal in school, this can be very important, especially for children or families of low income. We can also support women, mothers that can go to work if they have early childhood education, a safe and good place to where their children can be during the day and they can work. And then in broader terms, again, is education achieving its long-term goals of providing more equal opportunities and making society a better place? I think that's our big question, right? So for the DAC criteria, OECD criteria, that's what I wanted to talk about, and I want to listen your views on it. And lastly, I want to talk very briefly about another issue, which is research and evaluation for educational innovation. So that's an issue where I've been working a lot for the last years. And I think some of the issues are quite relevant to bring here, because I've also been seeing in development cooperation evaluation, the question of innovation and the question of piloting programs. So how can we help a government or an initiative that is piloting a program that is new, that is innovative, that tries to reach challenges in a different way? How can we measure them as they're being developed, and then help it see what can be improved and what should and how it could be scaled? So I brought some issues here that are from research and evaluation for education and innovation that we use in products, and we also use in programs, in new programs. And then there's a few issues there. One is that it's an ongoing evaluation. So it's not just a picture. We say it's a film. We start even before the program is implemented. Once you're thinking about what you can do, you can already assess for value, which would be similar to relevance. Then we have a topic of fail fast, fail cheap, is how we call it in innovation and product innovation, which means if you're building something new and we're planning something new, most probably there will be a lot of issues that are wrong, that will not fit. So the earlier, the fastest we can find out what doesn't work, the fastest and the cheapest we can improve it, and then we can make it work. So for example, when we're building a product, before the developers, the engineers that are very expensive build the platform, you can already do a prototype and ask people for the value. People can try it out and see its usability, if they can understand it. And the same goes for a program, right? For any kind of initiative. Straightforward communication and rapid decision-making. So we're working together, researchers are working together with implementers, with those who are developing the initiative to improve it. So often we also the people who are working on the program would like to participate in the assessment, to be part of the research, or at least to be very close to the researchers and have very rapid and very straightforward results that can be used for rapid decision making. And lastly, there's a mix of data sources and multiple stakeholders, so we can get data from interviews, from groups, from usability tests. Also, if it's a digital program, data from what is being used in the platform, for how people are using it. And also, if we have some kind of training to use that program or to implement it, we can also, and some channel where people can have doubts and can write what they say that they are not able to use or to do something. You can also get that type of data. And multiple stakeholders, because we have to talk to children, to teachers, but also to school leadership and district. So in the end, and then lastly, similar to what we're doing in when we talk about the OECD DAC criteria, here we also have different types of criteria. Normally we start with value. We want to know if it's valuable even before we've built it or before we've implemented the program. And then we test for usability. Can people even understand it? Can people use it? Can people be aware of what's going on? And then we go to efficiency, effectiveness. Of course, if we want to plan an impact evaluation, it's important to plan it from the beginning, so that if maybe we have to do some randomized controlled groups, but we'll probably be able to assess and see results, impact results further on, when the program is already being implemented, and the first mistakes and first lessons have been learned and have been improved. People can use it. They are already efficient, and now they start to have an impact. And so this is what I wanted to bring to you today. Please get in touch. So I'm on LinkedIn. I write a lot in Portuguese, and also in English. I will be very happy to be in contact with you through LinkedIn. And this is also my emails here, in case you want to write and to continue this conversation. And then I'll go back to Fabricio. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Isabel. It was very, very interesting, very informative. And let me try and summarize some of the key issues that were raised here. I think my first impression is that really when we think about the evaluation of education as people outside the education sector, right, as non-experts, as just evaluators in general, we tend to think a lot about student performance and the institutional performance of schools, and which brings us to impact evaluation and measuring that performance, right? So that would be sort of the first thing that we would think about. And what you've shown us is that there are so many dimensions in which we have to evaluate education. In terms of relevance and coherence, what you're bringing there are not, accessory questions. They're really essential questions about the quality of the curriculum and whether it serves its purpose, whether students are happy, whether what they're learning is going to be useful for their future. and also looking at teachers and managers in the educational sector. They have to have some career logic to it. And nowadays we see a lot of people not wanting to join the educational career. We usually think about pay. Of course, pay is important, but the importance of coherent policy, the importance of predictability. Before you join a professional career and all that. And those are you can't take any of those pieces that you brought up out and say that you've done a thorough evaluation of a program or of a policy. So it's interesting because from the practical point of view, it's almost impossible. It's extremely complicated to do a complete sort of holistic, thorough evaluation of one program or one policy, right? Because it's you have to choose the dimensions because practically, if we're going to tackle all those questions at the same time, unless we're dealing with one school or a small school district, it's just an immense amount of work and questions to ask. So that like my first takeaway there is that evaluation commissioners should consider being more economical, right? Having parsimony in what they specify as the purpose of their of their of the evaluation that they're hiring out, because otherwise you can get easily sort of entwined in a sea really of evaluation issues and answers, and ending up producing massive reports that may not be read. But my first question here is actually it's not from me. It's from Christian Maneiro. He comes from Uruguay. He's also part of the Planeval senior consultancy team, and he is asking about RCTs. Right towards the end, you were talking about impact, and which is sort of the first dimension that comes to mind when you speak about education. Would you say that RCT is really the favored method for evaluating the impact of education? And if not, how else can we measure it? Could you discuss a little bit about methods for evaluating impact in education from your experience? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, RCTs are the gold, what we call the gold standard, right? So in evaluation and also in education. So I think it's a little bit about what I discussed in the end. There's a lot of challenges in running an RCT. If you manage to go through all the challenges of actually can we ascribe, can we implement it in some places and not in others, and how we actually going about it. And then there's an issue of, and I think that's where generally the evaluation community don't tackle, because it's not in their specialty, but are the tests actually measuring what needs to be measured? I think that's a question when we talk about RCT in education, because you're using tests and then you're comparing, but maybe there's other results, there's other impacts that are not in the test that should be measured. And so I understand that, yes, RCT is the gold standard, and it's very useful to measure impact, but it's not helpful to measure impact if you don't know what's causing that impact. So if you don't have a critical view about that impact, then it can be useful to say, okay, to give it a seal and say, okay, a badge, right? And say, okay, it worked. But it also doesn't mean that it will work in a different context. And that's another issue. It's not only for education, but maybe it worked in that context, but you don't know why. If you only do the RCT methodology, and so you don't know in which conditions it can work or it can't work, for example. So I would strongly recommend that we also have qualitative indicators that we also measure, for example, the type of, and normally the depends, of course, on the program, but the programs have their own assessments, internal tests and activities, for example, if it's a curriculum. So you also have to measure internally what type of results they were having, so that we can explain what the results are in the RCT. Classrooms observations are very important when we talk about education. So we have to see what's actually going on in the classrooms. Focus groups, talking with the children, especially understanding the views of the teachers. It's very multifaceted. So you have to figure out where the issues are and what the impediments are. There's also something like I've been part of some RCT assessments that work with that are dealing with digital education, and it's common that you don't see any results on the RCTs, but then it doesn't mean that the platform is not good or the product is not good, but the context that it's been used in, they don't have the infrastructure that is needed, or they don't have the specific training. Often when we talk about when we're using national exams, then what national exams are measuring are something which is much broader and much more complex than with what is actually being taught, because the students are quite deficient in terms of what the national assessment is assessing and where they are at. So if you only use as a measure a very high measure, you can't even measure the little bit that was achieved because it doesn't appear in the exams results. So those are some of the issues. So it's very useful and very important to use the RCTs, but I think there's a context there that you have to be aware of and use together with the RCTs at least.
Yeah, and that speaks to an issue that's relevant to evaluation in general, is really about when to apply RCTs and when are they most useful, right? Because you need to understand what they do and what they don't do in terms of explaining how you got there. So what you say is, I fully agree, and I think the literature has demonstrated that extensively, is that interventions are context dependent, and if one intervention may not have an impact in one context, and have an immense impact in another context, and that tells you just how important it is for you to understand what you were saying in the beginning as an evaluator, the causal chain, right? The results framework. So how did we get to where we did? So what were the activities and the coalitions and the solutions that were implemented in a given context that actually explain the outcome that you observe? So and that goes beyond having a theory of change. Of course, you have to have a theory of change to finance your project or your program to begin with, but to understand how you want to get there, and that's your starting point. But after you measure impact, you really have to reconstruct that theory of change, or at least you have to go back and understand, is this the result of our initial plan a few years ago, or other things happened in between? So if you don't answer the question of what actually happened and that caused this outcome, either positive or negative, you're not doing the full scope of impact evaluation, which is heavily interpretive, right? Because we tend to think about, numbers as sort of definitive, but they require interpretation. They require explanation. Well, first, because you want to improve your program, you want to make it more effective, but also you want to apply it to other contexts. So you want to make sure that the people who learn from your evaluation don't make the same mistakes that you did, or replicate what and you've demonstrated that that's not context dependent, and that's, I think, where methods like, as you said, more qualitative, like contribution analyses and other sort of more holistic takes on it can complement RCTs, right? They can come in as explanatory devices that will make the evaluation more relevant, more useful, etc.
There's also an issue of timing, right? So impact assessment is important, but if you do it too early, you can do it so that we have, of course, a baseline and you start monitoring it. But if you look for an impact very early, you can be very unfair to the program, because also the other thing is when you implement something new, maybe at the beginning things will get worse before they start getting better, because there's a lot of change, there's a lot of people have to get used to it, people have to learn something new. And so if you measure it too early and you expect to have an impact results too early, you might be being unfair and and as a resource that you might not be using for the best purpose. So it's I guess it has to be running for a while, and the implementation being more sound, and people being understanding it and being able to use it. There's a lot of indicators that have to be measured before you can actually measure impact. I think that's also an issue that is very important.
Definitely. And yeah, and actually when we were presenting your last slide on impact, you brought up a series of very interesting indicators that have to be taken into consideration. Emotions, well-being, the impact of education on nutrition patterns, and the mother's opportunity to work. And I think this is particularly related to early school education, early grade education, and so those are it's not just the intended performance, but it's also sort of the performance on actors that are but maybe not the intended performance, but not just the intended performance on the student, but also on the other actors that are a part of the ecosystem of the school, such as parents and teachers and etc. Our next question would be on innovation, especially distance education and resources that technology brings into the classroom, right? So you have a lot of experience in that. You've worked, from within the industry, so to speak, in publishing and educational resources, etc. What is your take on that in general? So what is we know that education probably increases in efficiency, I dare to say, because it's just technology brings in a way to better organize classroom time. It saves teacher preparation time, etc. But in terms of effectiveness, how do you see the contribution of technology to education in general? Has it been proved to improve effectiveness, or is it not exactly like that?
Yeah, I think I dare to say that there are not a lot of research, of sound research and RCT research, for example, proving already that technology helps. There are a few. So it's an emerging field as well, to not only to build technology and implement, but also to assess. So earlier evaluations on technology would evaluate only if there are computers in classrooms. So the students have computers, and then does that make an impact on education? And it has been realized that it doesn't. So only having the computer doesn't impact in education. And then lately there's been more research on, well, and that's why also I brought the question of because how was it developed? So the digital platform, is it based on science? So it will only work if it has been created to answer specific problems and specific goals of education, and then you have to have education experts working on the development of the product, for example, with science, right? And so lately there have been some interesting evaluations that have chosen, for example, sometimes that there was not impact on student performance, but there was impact on student motivation. So students were more engaged, although you couldn't by the national tests really identify an increase in education achievement. You could, with questionnaires and with other type of means, see an improvement, for example, in engagement, or also with the usage data. So in other cases, for example, when we talk about digital platforms or resources that help parents talk to children, or the school talk to the parents, how this improved engagement from the parents in the schools. So it's interesting what you're saying, because there's an industry growing and there's a very important demand, but we don't know exactly yet. It's not very well established what actually works, what doesn't work. It's all very new and experimental. So there's a lot of research being done, that is not impact assessment like the golden standard that has been showing some very some prominent and interesting results, but it's still an ongoing process, I think, and we'll see more in the future, hopefully. But one thing that is important that we know in education is that the relationship between teacher and students is very important, especially the youngest they are, but also for teenagers. So the idea that you have a machine instead of the teacher, I think that's an idea that people don't use, right? That people don't agree with, because it's not only about content, it's about leadership, it's about relationship, it's about engagement. So today we think a lot about technology as tools to help teachers, and not to be there instead of the teacher. I think that's very important when we talk about education and technology.
Thanks. Yeah, and I was we have a question on classroom observations. I mean, I think again, method needs to follow content, right? We need to use the techniques that are better suited to answering a particular question, while taking into consideration the overall sort of purpose of the evaluation. And on that note, we've mentioned RCTs, of course, that are applicable to sort of more long-term impact assessments. In terms of qualitative assessments, it would, when we think about interviews with teachers and classroom observations, would you say that we could use those as impact assessments, or are those more geared towards assessing the quality of products and results? And because there's the question of how we generalize also from those observations, right? I think it may depend on the sorts of questions that you ask, but in general, when you think about, oh, I'm going to observe students using a particular educational resource or student-teacher interactions, I'm going to try and understand, whether the curriculum is relevant or not by looking at the way that students respond to it. There's so many factors involved, right? There's the profile of the neighborhood. It's a bit path dependent also, whether the school has adopted that particular curriculum recently or not, etc. So what is your perception about the uses and limitations of qualitative methods like classroom observations and interviews?
So classroom observations, you can actually use it in a qualitative or also with a quantitative perspective, right? So in education, the World Bank has and some other organizations have had some methods where they used quantitative classroom observations. There you have to have some very specific rubrics that you have to observe. So, for example, how much time is spent on the teacher on the board, how much time is spent on group work, how much time is spent not doing classroom activity. So one of the issues there is, for example, that you can see that you might want to achieve in a program is that you have more actually pedagogical time in classrooms and not administrative time. So what is the ratio of classroom time that is actually being directed to pedagogical issues, and what ratio is like, be quiet, student, and now we're going to everybody sit down, now we're going to see who's here and who is absent. So this type of, for example, of classroom observation, you can do quantitatively, and then you can even measure. So this type of teacher professional development or this initiative improved the ratio of time that is directed to pedagogical issues. For example, that would be a classroom observation based on quantitative methods. But I think it's mostly interesting. It's most interesting when you use it for qualitative methods, because then you can actually experiment, you can be there and you can see what's going on, and then you can have a lot of insights as to why something works or why something doesn't work or how something could be improved. And yes, of course, it's hard to generalize. maybe it wouldn't be an impact evaluation in that sense, but it would definitely be very important for effectiveness evaluation. So you can see if the goals of the programs are being reached, and you can see how you can improve the program, and if people actually understand it. That's, I think, most of the insights we get when we are in the context and we're looking at what's happening. And even to improve the questions about questionnaires, for example, we want to run questionnaires with a large amount of teachers, but what are you going to ask? And you can get very important ideas of what you should be asking through the qualitative observation. So I think observation is probably one of the most exciting parts, and where you actually get most of the insights and ideas to explain things, and also to have further questions or to improve programs and products. But of course, it's part. I think it's always important to have both, to have the quantitative and qualitative.
Thanks very much, Isabel. Yes, I mean we've done a few evaluations that involve classroom observations, and now that you've mentioned the way the World Bank approaches it. Of course, we don't want to generalize, but counting time and counting things, again, it gives you that perception of you have this objective information about how time is divided and all that. Of course, it's important, but I would add to it the fact that you have to have qualified researchers that are able to understand what's going on in the classroom, and not just people who are literally enumerating what's going on. And I think because that firsthand experience, it's crucial for the evaluator and for the evaluation. And I tend to think you have to have qualified, in this case, education researchers doing whatever kind of primary research at hand. In order to be able to give the proper context to what's going on, and sometimes probe with additional questions and all that. Thank you. I think we're our time is up, and I wanted to thank Isabel for sharing this extremely interesting presentation on different ways to evaluate education. As I said, it is so rich, and from each one of those rubrics, you can make an entire evaluation. So I invite our friends and guests to look at the recording of this evaluation again, for those of you who are curious to go into further detail about it, because I am sure you will find inspiration for your own evaluations there, and both evaluation commissioners and evaluators are going to find lots of exciting material there. We've in the chat box, Yasmin has just added Isabel's contact information, as well as an evaluation that Planeval has done that uses multi-methods, as RCTs with classrooms observations. If you guys want to take a look, it's on our website. Okay. Thank you all for your participation. Yeah, Yasmin, you can close, definitely.
Great. Thank you so much, Isabel, for this fascinating presentation. I honestly, I think I could just stay here and listen to you talk about this for hours, endless. And again, thank you so much, Fabrizio, for your help with the chat. It's always appreciated. And thank you so much for all of you who joined us live, or those of you who will be watching this recording later. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me or to Isabel directly. As Fabrizio mentioned, her contacts are in the chat box. And we look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. So thank you so much, and we see